The reading of the gospel. The gospel lesson this morning from the 17th chapter of Luke, verses 5 through 10. The apostles said to the Lord, "Increase our faith." The Lord replied, "If you had faith the size of a mustard seed, you could say to this mulberry tree, 'Be uprooted and planted in the sea,' and it would obey you. Who among you would say to your slave who has just come in from plowing or tending sheep in the field, 'Come here at once and take your place at the table'? Would you not rather say to him, 'Prepare supper for me, put on your apron and serve me while I eat and drink. Later you may eat and drink'? Do you thank the slave for doing what was commanded? So you also, when you have done all that you were ordered to do, say, 'We are worthless slaves. We have done only what we ought to have done.'" Praise God for the hearing of these sacred words. Thanks be to God. You may be seated.
Good morning. I always say it, but it is a gift to be with you. It's a joy and a gift to be with you today. As we do get started, let us pause for a moment of prayer. Would you pray with me? Lord, in these next moments, I do ask that you would grant us the grace that we could be present to you even as you're here present with us. Lord, I ask that you would take the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts. You would work and move in such a way that they would be made to be acceptable in your sight, for indeed you are our rock and you are our Redeemer. Amen. So I'm going to show my age a little bit. How many remember Forrest Gump? How many here remember? Oh, wow. Okay, we're good shape. All right. So in Forrest Gump, here's how it goes. Life is like a box of chocolates. Okay, I'm just going to go on a limb here and say I don't completely agree with Forrest Gump, completely. I would say life is more like a tube of toothpaste. When you put the pressure on, the truth has a way of coming out. All right? Hold on to that image. Hold on to that image, because the truth of the matter is our true faith is revealed not when life is going great. Our true faith is revealed not when we get what we want, but our true faith is revealed, in my opinion, when life gets difficult and it's challenging. The truth has a way of coming out when the pressure is on. I had a professor say it this way: how we respond in our crucifixion will determine the success of both our witness and our ministry. Think about that. How we respond when life gets difficult will determine the success of our witness and our ministry with others. That's difficult to hear, I know, but I'm convinced it's true. For the month of October, our theme, as you can see, is going to be the faith in the fire. It's going to be talking about the fact that sometimes faith is difficult and sometimes practicing our faith is difficult. And the truth of the matter is, we're living in the midst of a challenging time when it comes to practicing our faith. Just call it what it is. It's a challenging time when it comes to practicing and living into what we believe as Christians. And one of the things that makes it challenging, quite honestly, is that we don't always agree as Christians, right? I mean, I say this a lot in our membership classes. I'll say to them, new members, here's the thing about Christianity. It's not Christianity, it's Christianities. We have different ways of thinking about the faith. We have different ways of living into the faith. It's just as true as it can be. And in our world today, there are some that are very confident in their faith. They're very confident in what they believe. They're fine and they're comfortable with enforcing their virtue upon other people. The image that comes to my mind when I think about this group of folks is it's like the person who prays so loudly in the restaurant so that everyone else hears that they're praying. Have you ever experienced that before? Because it happens sometimes. They'll pray so loud that everyone knows that they're praying. That's one group of Christians in our world today, but there's another group of Christians, I believe, in our world today that, quite honestly, they're struggling. They see the way that the faith is being lived out in our society today. They just call it what it is. They're not completely convinced that they want to identify as a Christian anymore because of the way that they see the faith being lived out in our world today. And if that's you, and you're struggling with your faith in that way, I just want to say right now, I get it. I do. I don't always tell people I'm a pastor right away. Why? Because I want to avoid difficult conversations and controversial topics. I don't always tell people I'm a pastor right away. Instead, I would prefer that they see the way that I live my life And then in doing so, maybe that can lead us to a natural conversation. And that's why I love this lesson today from Luke. Instead of this up-in-your-face kind of Christianity and this up-in-your-face kind of faith in our lesson today, we have an image of faith, an understanding of faith that's really, it's more about living it out. And it's in living it out that we begin to bear witness to God's love. Our lesson today comes from Luke 17. You just heard it today, moments ago. And the thing about our lesson today is the context. The verses leading up to it really do set the stage for the passage you just heard. Just before our lesson today, Jesus had some very difficult things to say, some challenging things to say. In chapter 17, verse 1, Jesus says to the disciples, there will be all kinds of opportunities for us to stumble. That's what he says to the disciples. There's going to be all kinds of opportunities for us to lose our way. And woe to the one, he goes on, woe to the one who is the cause of the stumbling. They'd be better off tying a millstone around their neck and jumping into the sea and drowning themselves. Now, that's some difficult language, right? That's some challenging language. But what's interesting to me is the Greek word that Jesus uses in that passage when he talks about stumbling. The Greek word is scandala. This is where we get our English word scandal. What's Jesus saying here? Well, he's saying to his disciples, there's going to be all kinds of scandals out there that, if we're not careful, can serve as opportunities for us to put our faith in the wrong sorts of places. Here's an example. We present God in the wrong sort of way. That's kind of like a scandal, right? Instead of a loving God, a compassionate God, we present God in a judgmental sort of way. Or another example. We say we believe in a loving God, but then we don't treat people in a compassionate way. That's a stumbling block. Or another example. We're harsh. We refuse to forgive. We're harsh on other people for the mistakes that they make. And then we don't forgive other people. We don't forgive people when they've wronged us. All of those, if we're not careful, they can be stumbling blocks in which we present the faith in the sort of way where we lead people astray. It's into that context that the disciples say the words that we just heard. Lord, increase our faith. That's the disciples' response. Increase our faith, because that sounds difficult. That sounds challenging to live into this stuff. Lord, that's going to be very, very hard for us. And so, Lord, increase our faith. And Jesus then responds with the verse that you've all heard before. If you have just faith the size of a mustard seed, then you'll be able to do very difficult and challenging things. You'll say to the mulberry tree, be thrown into the sea, and it will obey you. So what does all this mean? Well, the disciples, it seems, they think of faith in terms of quantity. It's like gas in a tank of a car. If we have more of it, we're able to do more difficult things. It's faith as quantity, according to the disciples. But Jesus, he flips that script in our verse today. Instead of saying faith is quantity, what Jesus basically says in our verse today is that faith is more about quality. It's about where we put our faith and whom we put our faith in. Here's a few quick examples. We can have all the faith we want in a bridge, but if the construction of the bridge is faulty, when we try to walk across it, what's going to happen? We're going to fall in the river, right? Or here's another example. We can have all the faith that we want in a password on our phone, and we can use that password on the phone over and over again, but if the password is wrong, what's going to happen? Well, if you're like my girls, you're going to get locked out of the phone, right? We can have all the faith we want in a person, but if that person's character is flawed, it doesn't matter how much faith we have. We're going to be disappointed. You see, when Jesus says if we have just the faith the size of a mustard seed, what he's saying is what's important is not how much faith we have as much as it's where do we put our faith. In Jesus' words, when we put our faith in God, we're able to act on God. God can take just that little act of obedience and use it in a big, big way. And the Bible's filled with stories like this. Abraham, for example, did you know he did not have a perfect faith? Abraham is the model of faith in the Bible, but his faith was not perfect. He laughed at God. He tried to take shortcuts when it came to God's plan. He doubted God at times. And yet, what little faith he did have in God, he put it to use. And so, when it got down to it and God asked him to leave his home, Abraham left his home. And what happened? Well, God made Abraham into a great nation, became the father of the faith. Moses, another example. When God called Moses, what did Moses do? He didn't say, "Oh, I'm ready, let's go to it." No. Moses said, I'm not eloquent when it comes to speech. I don't have the ability to go do this, God. And yet Moses took what little faith he did have, and he finally listened. And as a result of Moses listening, what happened? He confronted the most powerful person in the world of those days, the Pharaoh, and he led the Israelites to their freedom. David wasn't perfect in his faith either. But when it got down to it, he decided not to put his faith in swords or armor or might or size. Instead, he took what little faith he did have, and he took just a stone, he put it in God's hands, and he ended up taking down Goliath. One more real quick. Jesus' mother, Mary. God says to Mary, "You're going to give birth to the Messiah. You're going to give birth to Jesus." Mary doesn't have it completely figured out. The Gospels tell us that she pondered it all in her heart. But what she did is she took what little faith she did have, she put it to use. And of course, God used that in a big way. What do we learn from all this? Well, we don't have to have God all figured out. We don't have to have all the answers. We can still have questions. But if we're willing to take what little faith we do have, just the faith of a mustard seed, and put that in God's hands and use just a little bit of obedience with that little faith we do have, God can transform that and make it into something huge and big. It can have ripple effects. And so the question becomes, what's this faith look like? In our lesson today, Jesus gives us the model. Just after the mustard seed verse, he goes on to say, he said, the mustard seed faith really, Jesus' words in our lesson today, the mustard seed faith really is like a servant who goes serving in the fields and then comes back home and they keep serving. In our lesson today, that's the picture of a mustard seed faith. It's like a servant, according to Jesus, they go serving in the fields. And when they come back home, they keep serving anyway. Translation: faith according to Jesus is not about the fireworks. It's not about a show. It's not about displays of power. But faith according to Jesus is about keeping the candle lit in the middle of the night. It's about those little acts of obedience, those little acts of love and kindness when no one else is looking. It's honesty at work when no one else is watching. It's the parent who wakes up in the middle of the night to take care of the kid that wakes up at 4 a.m. It's the person who says, you know what? I don't feel like praying today. I'm not even sure I understand any of this anymore, but I'm going to pray anyway. It's the person who says, boy, I messed up. Please forgive me. And it's also the person who says, I'm going to forgive them. You see, a mustard seed faith is taking what little faith we do have and being willing to do that difficult thing and that right thing even when no one is watching. It was this past week, I had my Food and Faith over at the University of Evansville. And we have it every other week. And this past week, our conversation topic was spiritual guides. And what was interesting to me about our conversation is when I asked the students who their spiritual guides were, the answers they gave. The first one said that their spiritual guide right now is someone that they work with in a coffee shop. And they're willing to forgive them even when they mess up the drinks. this person forgave them over and over again. And as a result, and we minimize things like this, but often we act like it doesn't matter, but it really does, because what happens is this person that forgave this person for messing up the drink over and over again has created an environment in that work where they feel safe to continue to try. Another person talked about a youth leader who loved and served well. Another person talked about a grandparent who was fiercely for them. But what was curious to me is that they didn't say some big theologian, some person that had it all figured out. No, what they talked about was the people who, like the servant in the story, had that mustard seed kind of faith and were obedient and were able to give in those little sorts of ways that had huge impact down the road. And so here's the question. Where are we going to put our faith, right? Where are we going to really put it? In power? In leaders? In our politics? Ourselves? And the answer to all those is no. We don't put our faith in these kinds of things. The gospel invites us to put our faith in the love of God revealed in Jesus Christ. That's what the gospel invites us to do. And when we're able to work with that love, great things can happen. I've said it once, I'll say it again. God loves each of us in a Christ-like way. Because of that love, our lives work best in a Christ-like way, as individuals, as a community, in our life together as a nation. And the way I can prove it is this. Notice what happens when we fail to love our neighbors as ourselves. Notice. They don't go away. They just come back to us as problems. And why do they come back to us as problems? Because it's out of tune with the love of God that's humming through this universe. A mustard seed faith says, God, I don't have it all figured out, but I'm going to do the next Christ-like thing because I believe. That's the most powerful force in this universe. In a world with constant distractions, in a world with constant scandals, the invitation of the gospel is to do what little things we can do to reflect the love of God. And in doing so, we become a witness. So with that faith in mind, let us open ourselves to the gift of God's love and presence now through Holy Communion.